Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article, to a photograph, to a competition, to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear, might just get the chip, and he does, he's scored! Oh, what a great backlash! He's done it! Oh, brilliant! Wiggling his way, that's an excellent one, and Dini! It's a goal, that's four for Clydebank. Excellent play by Hughes. I think the player of the match, and sweetly finished by Penny.
And this week, our guest is the Morton legend, Andy Ritchie. Andy, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome, Tom. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. It's an absolute honour and a pleasure to have you on. It's so thank you for taking the time to join us today.
You're welcome. No problem.
This week, we're looking at a copy of Shoot from the 2nd of August 1980. So let's have a wee look at the cover. So on the cover, we've got Laurie Cunningham of Real Madrid there, playing against Barcelona, and the headline, Laurie Cunningham's success or failure. Shoots nationwide, can Ipswich make the breakthrough? Film star Ossie Ardiles, and there's a heading that says, should Kevin Keegan be captain of England? And it's all from Shoot, the #1 soccer magazine. And we look at the price, 22 pence at this point, August 1980. Canada 60 cents, Australia 50 cents. Andy, would you have bought Shoot or a similar magazine when you were young?
Yeah, we were brought up with Shoot, Tom. This was the magazine. Yeah, 22 pence. What a bargain it was at that time as well. You know, it was new to the scene as far as football was concerned then, and it covered everything. It was the first magazine I ever read. You know, that took you out with the bounds of the west of Scotland, more or less, Tom. You know, and it changed the whole concept of football without any shadow of a doubt. And I was fortunate, would you believe, Tom, that I won the Shoot Footballer of the Year here in Scotland.
Yeah, I think we're going to get to that at some point.
Right.
There's a clip
Oh,
in that.
I got it quicker than you, Tom. Don't worry about that, you know. Kenny won it down in Liverpool, and I won it up here in Scotland that year, you know. And that was a big thing, you know. And the Shoot magazine were just beginning to break into Scotland as well at that time. You know, they had discovered a scene like that and quite liked it. So, yeah, it was a big thing. And, yeah, every week you read it, without a shadow of a doubt, every week.
I think Andy, the thing that Tom and I point out a lot, especially with the sort of early years of Shoot magazine, is the amount of Scottish content that's in it was really, you know, quite impressive. Whether it be the game up in Scotland or Scottish players down south, it
Yes.
really was noticeable by the amount of content in it. So I mean, that in itself, just when you compare it to nowadays and the coverage that we get up here, it's night and day.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, you know, and you're right to touch on that as well, because, you know, 95% of the Scottish international team played down south at that time, you know, so there was plenty of Scottish content even out with our own football up here. But it was more important to us up here to be seen down there as well, you know. Everybody read it, everybody knew about it. I'm just looking at Laurie Cunningham on the front here, and I remember when Laurie Cunningham signed for Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, would you believe, made an inquiry, and I went out with Hal Stewart to speak to their chairman at that time. He just joined it. What was his name? That famous Jesus Gill was the chairman's name at it. Atletico Madrid at that time, and Real had signed the best player, so-called, in England, and Atletico Madrid at that time had brought me here to discuss with Hal about signing, you know, and Hal wanted £1 million plus so many roll-ons. We spent about 3 hours. Atletico Madrid had a game that day as well. I remember we watched the game here in Spain, Hal and myself, and I think by the time we got to the end of all that, Jesus Gill, who went on to become quite a personality in the game as well, was that sick, fed up listening to Hal Stewart. He couldn't get rid of us quick enough, you know. But they signed somebody else for a lot less money, probably a better player at that time. But it'd be nice, you know. Laurie Cunningham, what a fantastic player he was. And I think he was around about the first, you know, with all the boys in the 50s who had made it big time with continental clubs like that, you know. And it it was a booster. But I remember thinking, "Whoa, aye," and no bad placement, ready.
Would you have fancied that then, Andy, playing in Spain?
I probably cut my right leg off, Tom, to be honest with you. It was just another one of the disappointments that I seemed to be hovering around about that time. That if they had to come in with some sort of valuation, Hal, or maybe £400,000 or £500,000, they would maybe have got that deal done. Maybe, nobody knows. But I would have been there at a heartbeat. For 45 quid a week part time in Scotland to playing with Atletico Madrid. But as it say, Tom, it would have been a no-brainer.
So you think Hal was maybe pricing you out a move at the time then? Or was he just trying to get as much as he could?
He just wanted to get as much as he could at that time. And he had this idea that, he would get millions, maybe no one, but maybe no one, maybe two, maybe up round about that, He had this idea and he was going to stick by it. That was the type of man that he was, And I think, as I say, with Jesus Gill, he was non-negotiable. And I think what they were talking about was in the region of £300,000 to £400,000. So it was out the ballpark right away. But that was a figment of Hal's imagination, guys. That's what it was, And at that time, if I can take you back a wee bit like that, football players were treated more or less like slaves at that time. You didn't go anywhere that the club didn't want you to go. Once you'd signed for that football club, that was you signed for life. Up until the time that they decided that, they didn't want you anymore, or somebody gave them some ridiculous offer. And, that was always in Hal's mind to get £1 million for me. It was never going to happen. Never, but you couldn't convince him of that at that time. And you really, didn't matter how you felt, about it yourself, made absolutely no difference. There was an article in your shoot there about me wanting to move on at that time and go somewhere else. And I said I would never kick another ball for Morton and all this kind of stuff, That was the only string you had to your bow. You would try and kick your heels up. To be honest with you, make a bloody pest of yourself for a wee while and start making noises that, only pissed off your own supporters at that time as well. But that was really the only string you had in your bow to try and get a move like that. And that's the way it worked. Up until the time they'd had enough of you, you were stuck there.
Yeah. Can you tell us a wee bit more about Hal? I think he was a wee bit of a visionary in Scottish football. He was a guy with an eye for the main chance, I think.
I think he was like that in life. Right. I didn't really know nothing at all about Hal Stewart other than the business that I had with him down at Morton, but he seemed to have, quite a checkered career prior to getting involved in football clubs, I remember a story about tobacco company. He ran a tobacco company, for some Americans out here making cigarettes. And what he was doing then was his contacts in the game. He was getting all the players at that moment in time to go around all the places doing, play heady tennis and football halls and that, and advertise the American Tobacco Company at that time. So that was his interest, his format into getting involved in football. Paying guys money to go and do things like that, football players. And then he discovered the football club. But yeah, it could have been, I once described him as, being Arthur Daly before Arthur Daly. His soft hat, he was always immaculately dressed, you would get to see him about some more money and you'd come out having left money on his table, he was that convincing that things were going to work out for everybody. He had this beautiful personality. You knew you were being conned. You knew that. But there was absolutely bugger all you could do about it, And you couldn't dislike him. You would come out banging doors and you wouldn't be halfway along the corridor, you burst out laughing yourself with some of the shit that he was coming away with, He just was that type of person. A lovable granddad he would have been.
All right, we turn over the page then.
Before we do it, I just want to have a look at, because the kits they're very, very simplistic. There's no logos of that on them. The Real Madrid is just white. The Barcelona is, the classic Barcelona stripes. But I just want to look at, if we zoom in, the shorts seem to have a pocket on the front of them. Because that's a definite fold with a button. Mm-hmm. Isn't it? And it's like, I've never seen a pair of professional football shorts that has a pocket on them. For what purpose? What purpose would you... I mean, you're not going to keep your 2 pences in there or anything like that, are you?
Well, that would have been ideal for me at Morton, because I was a smoker, so I could have had a fag and a lighter in there for half time rather than having to do what I did with my fag at half time anyway, you know. I used to have to plank it in the bathroom at Capello because I like to go for a half time smoke. And the first time I went down to play, it was a midweek game at Capello. I'll never forget it. I went in and I put my cigarette and my wee box of matches behind the cistern in the toilet. That shows you how fly I was at that time and the whole thing. And I would get in there at half time. But little did I know at that time that Wally Gray, the kit man, used to get in 10 minutes before half time and turn the big bath on, or the sheep dip as it was known, and all the condensation for the hot water running into the bath sogged all my fag and my matches, and I couldn't get my fag at half time. So I had to come up with an ingenious idea of wrapping it in tin foil and putting it behind the cistern so that it didn't go soggy, the fag and the matches. So they pants would have been ideal for me. You know, one Benson and Hedges, the wee box of Swan Vestas would have just fitted in lovely there.
Brilliant. The head of their time there, then, eh? Absolutely brilliant. But I'd never seen anything like that before on a pair of football shorts, so I just thought I'd point that out to him.
It's one of my pet hates in football as well. I was speaking to a wee guy who just made up the Morton strip there, the new strip that they're using this year, and we're talking online about it. And I'd say to him, I hate buttons on a football strip. It's the most useless, stupid thing you're ever liable to have on the collars and all that. Football strips weren't made for buttons. They were way back in the 30s. I know they had them then, but then when they moved them on, there were so many nicer collars without having buttons on it. And what a nightmare. You know, the kit man's got to sit on a Friday night with his needle and thread and sew the buttons back on. And surely jersey pulling would make sure that you never had a button on a jersey in your life again. But it seems to have been popular. But I've never, ever seen it like that on shorts. No. Never seen a button on shorts.
No.
Over the page then, so pages 2 and 3, we've got Shoot Nationwide, East Anglia, Ipswich ready to make the breakthrough. And there's a picture there of Bobby Robson. So Bobby Robson, Andy, what did you have some interaction with Bobby Robson?
Oh yeah, I did a few times. I worked for a wee while down in England, so I used to see him about at that time and see him at games and what have you. But I remember having a bit of interaction with him that worked out really well for me, Tom. I was a chief scout at Celtic at the time with Tommy Burns, and Celtic and Barcelona had went out of Europe early that year, and they'd organised a friendly at Celtic Park, and Bobby Robson brought his team over to play the game. And I was at the game that night, obviously, and watched it. And Tommy Burns had invited me back into the manager's office for a cup of tea and what have you, so I wouldn't need to sit in all the traffic heading home again. So I was first in. Naturally, I was first in. They all went back to their dressing rooms, but Bobby Robson was in very quickly after that. And it was only myself, Rosemary, Thomas's good lady, and another lady for Celtic staff sorting out teas and coffees. So I grabbed myself a cup of coffee, and the door opened, and Bobby Robson came in with his entourage. I think Jose Mourinho was there, funny enough, if my memory serves me correct. Barcelona had beat Celtic that night in the game, and because I was the only one in the room, he acknowledged, and I acknowledged him, and he said, "Do you enjoy the game?" And what is it you do? I'm the chief scout here. So we started to talk that way, you know, and how's things going? You know, do you need any players? I said, I could use that wee baldy boy you've got in the middle of the park, the wee boy De La Peña. He was about 18 at that time. I said, I could do with him in the middle of the park out there. And the big boy Prozanetsky could do as a wee turn here in the midfield as well if you want to get rid of him, you know. So we're laughing. What is it you're looking for? I say, I'm looking for a striker. Everybody's looking for strikers. I says, I've been all over the place looking for one that can go up play with Henrik Larsson, you know. And he said to me, oh, what kind are? I said to him, somebody lives on the edge of things, can get in round about the box, good control, finishes, not a lot of money because we don't have a lot of money. He says, oh, not that many of them going about, you know, and blather. Anyway, Tommy Burns and Billy Stark come back into the office again, so automatically they get together and they're talking about the game and what have you. And after about quarter of an hour, they're leaving to go back to the hotel, Barcelona, and Bobby Robson came across. I thought he was holding his hand out to shake my hand, so I put my hand back over to say cheerio or whatever it was before. He says, there you go, that might help. And he put something into my hand, a bit of paper in my hand. I says, oh. Thanks very much. So I'm looking at it. First of all, I thought it was money. I panicked a wee bit, in case he was giving me a bung. And I just held it in my hand, and they said their Cheerios, and off they went. When I opened it up, there was a name on the bit of paper, and the name was George Cadetti. Bobby had him at Sporting Lisbon, and he knew all about him, and it must have been a wee 30-second conversation that he had sprung to mind. And he'd actually written £450,000 on the piece of paper as well, which lit up my eyes. Now, I knew of the name again, but I couldn't relate to it at that time. And I showed it to Thomas, and he said to me, "Oh, that's the guy that played." He said, "That was at the game, 5-0. They beat Scotland. Alan McCoy broke his leg that night." And he says, "Oh, I remember that guy." She's Sporting Lisbon. I go on to that and see how that works out. Go on to that right away. So I was on to it the next morning. The rest is history, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
But that was Bobby Robson, and he seemed a nice enough fella. And I met him a few times down in England, and I always introduced myself by thanking him for that wee bit of paper that he put into my hand. I met him at Southampton one day, the first time that I'd met him since then. And any time round about, any time I was at games, he was there. I always made sure I thanked him again for that one. But what a record they had at Ipswich. And then you go, we talked about Scottish players earlier on. He had a few of them down there as well. Like George Burley, he had Alan Brazil, Johnny Walk, 3 smashing players down there, 3 legends down there at Ipswich. Yeah. And they all done a turn for him. But he had a very, very good scout at that time, by all accounts. And that helped him get the 3 boys down, But what a fantastic team. And then into Holland again, didn't he?
Yeah, that's Arnold Meehan.
And Franz Tyson.
Yeah.
Who was a big central defender again that played with Terry Butcher?
Russell Osman.
Russell Osman. Good player. Good player. Mick Mills. Used to see Mick Mills running about when I was scouting in England as well. He did a bit of work. And the big fella that died there a couple of weeks ago. Big centre for Paul Marner, yeah. He was the original breed English striker at that time. Mobile, big, win things in the air, link up with wee fellas like Alan Brazil, wee fat fellas like Alan Brazil. They were a very, very good football team with very, very good football players. I think that was Bobby's style.
All right, so just on that page, it's looking at East Anglia, and it's looking at the other managers of the East Anglian clubs there. Picture of John Bond, who's been Norwich City at that time. Peter Morris and John Docherty control the fate of East Anglian football. The article says, and there's a wee note there about Justin Fashanu. Justin Fashanu has packed enough action into his short, explosive career to earn England Youth and Under-21 honours, as well as attracting a bid of £500,000 from Newcastle. The Fashanu was obviously at Norwich City at the time. Anything you spotted on that page there?
Just the fact that East Anglian football was just beginning to break through a wee bit at that time as well. They were beginning to get a bit more notice outside East Anglia. The fact that Norwich weren't as big and as powerful a club, their turn was to come later on as well. But that for me put Norwich and Ipswich on the map for me at that time when I was reading things like that. And then obviously the football looked after itself after that, Johnny Bond, I think Johnny Bond went to Manchester City after he was at Norwich. I don't know about the other 2 gentlemen that were in it as well, but between the 2 of them, they had big careers. John Bond and obviously Bobby Robson. And it must have been a real exciting time in East Anglia to be a Norwich and an Ipswich supporter at that time, especially Ipswich. European stuff was to come their way as well. But the amount of fantastic, I thought I just saw the name there and I left it out, and he'll be raging if he watches the podcast. Terry Butcher. Yeah. He likes to be mentioned every so often, Terry, quiet, big, unassuming fella that he is, what a player he was as well. But a lot of good football players and a lot of good football action going on down there in that area of the country. And it's a smashing area of the country. I don't know if you guys have been there. Spent a lot of time down there. I was looking at players at Ipswich at that time when I was down at Celtic, and was desperately keen to try and get the wee boy Kieran Dyer up here. But he was destined for bigger things. But I'd got a tip off when I was scouting at that time for Alec Matthew, who played at Morton, who had gone to Ipswich in a transfer, and I knew Alec well, and Alec had tipped me off very, very early about the wee boy Dyer. So I spent a lot of time down there, and what a great, and it's not looked upon by other people in the country as being a big footballing area, but the Norwich and Ipswich supporters love their football team. I spent a bit of time down there with them, good people, you know. Two good clubs as well, two very good clubs, two well run, always there or thereabouts. Maybe not so much Ipswich at the moment because of circumstances, but two smashing clubs, well supported.
I think on there, John Docherty, who's the manager of Cambridge there, he was a Glaswegian. I don't know if you're aware of John. He played for Brentford,
I don't know.
Sheffield United, Brentford again, Reading, Brentford again. So he managed at Brentford as well. So I think he pretty much had a bit of a living with Brentford. But it seems as though most of his career's been down there.
Oh, there was a lot of guys at that time, you know, through the late 60s and early 70s. That's where you ended up. You know, you went down to England if you could at the very start of the whole thing, you know. I remember talking about Ipswich. Alan Brazil was at Celtic Boys Club when I was there. And Alan Brazil, I think, and he stated publicly on numerous occasions, would love to have signed for Celtic. But Celtic were only taking two strikers at that age group on at that time, and they ended up taking myself and George Mccullough. And Ali didn't get taken on, and he ended up going to Ipswich. And as I said earlier on, the rest is history after that. Yeah. But that was, you know, a lot of guys, Scottish guys, made their way down there, especially early on in their career, to try and make it big down in England, because that's what it was all about. If you could do that, other than the fact you went to Rangers and Celtic, if we were that way inclined, you know, you were trying to get the best possible club in England that you could get, and a lot of them had good careers down there.
Yeah.
Right, Andy, we go over the page again then. So this is Laurie Cunningham. So Laurie Cunningham, a success or failure, and it asked a few people involved in Spanish football for their opinions. So there's Laurie's Yugoslav manager, Vujin Boskov. Laurie is English, you mustn't forget that. It's difficult for an English player to arrive in Spain and be a superstar overnight, but he had a good campaign. He had good games and bad games, but that's understandable. I think the Barcelona manager there is Barcelona manager Helenio Herrera. I wouldn't want him in my team. He may be all right for Real Madrid, but I would never be interested in buying him.
That sounds like manager subbing me up. I like good football players, but I just don't want them in my team. Yeah. Was Helenio Herrera was the manager for Inter Milan when Celtic beat them in the European Cup final. And you know what kind of team they were, Inter Milan, you know, it's 1-0, Catenaccio shut the shop up and see what we can do. So I could imagine Laurie Cunningham would have been one of his, you know, top of his board for signing, you know. He didn't particularly like to be a forward-thinking manager, Herrera, you know. Big Jock sorted him out all right, you know.
So it mentions there that Laurie Cunningham's won a Spanish League Cup double plus a place in the European Cup semi-finals, made Laurie Cunningham's first campaign in the white strip of Real Madrid the most successful season of the 24-year-old English winner's career. It says he only scored 13 goals in 45 League Cup and European matches. By Laurie's own admission, not a spectacular haul. It sounds not too bad, and it sounds like he had a pretty good season there.
Aye. I think he did initially when he went earlier, but would I be correct in saying he may very well have had a car incident or a car crash at one time just after that? And
he was killed in a car crash.
I think he had one before the fatal crash that he was involved in. I think he had run into somebody, and I think a young lady was seriously injured. And that was previous to his fatal car crash like that. And I think he was injured himself and been out for a wee while after that. But he was an exciting football player. See, when he picked the ball up, you know, the buzz of the crowd and, you know, the way he wanted to attack people and take people on at that time. But West Brom had 2 or 3 of them in the team, very similar. Okay. So, you know, that's the way he played. He was an exciting Tanner ball player, as we used to say then, you know. Very athletic, great pace. Wasn't the greatest finisher, but he could score a goal, but he could create goals. You know, as soon as he picked the ball up, you know, his big pal that played at West Brom at that time, he was well known for singing the virtues of the the service that he got. Big, what was his name? Passed away. Yeah, Cyril Regis, you know. You talk about the service he received for Laurie Cunningham, you know. Really exciting player. But the first season, as it says in the article there, if I remember correctly, was probably his best season.
I think I remember seeing him. It was against Celtic in Europe, wasn't it? It was the second leg, and he took a corner from the right hand side, but he took it with his right foot, sort of from the outside of his right foot, and it was just like you didn't see things like that happen in those days. You know, people do things like that. It would either be an outswinger or an inswinger with your left foot, but he took it with his right foot and called it in. I think they scored from it, or I don't even know if he scored directly from it. I think maybe somebody put it in, but it was just a little bit of magic like that.
He was one of the guys that, you know, one of the guys that put black footballers on the map down south, without a shadow of a doubt. The West Brom boys were a big influence in that, and you know, because of that, because of the way he played the game, you know. What would you call them up here? A Gallus character. He was a right Gallus character. He always reminded me of the lead singer of Hot Chocolate. You know, the way he swaggered onto the park was the way the lead singer of the Hot Chocolate would swagger onto stage. And they made people sit up and take notice down there, you know, about the black guys that were coming through into the game at that time. They were definitely the missionaries of black football players down in England. Cunningham, Regis, and Brendan Batson was he the fullback as well, you know. Yeah. I'd seen many times before. I was a West Ham man when I went to London, when we used to go down there with the family. Big Clyde Best was the first one that came into, first black player that came into English football down there. And didn't he have the greatest time after the West Ham supporters? I remember that, you know. He was popular as a football player, but I don't think they were too happy at that time, West Ham, you know, having big Clive in the team all the time, you know. But he was the first one. But these guys really put the marker down for the black players to follow after that.
And just down the side of that page there, we've got World Cup Champions Brochure. So this is a 24-page brochure of Argentina's World Cup win. Argentina 1978-82 FIFA World Champions, it says. Only £1.35, including postage and packaging. Action pictures of your favourite stars, Ozzy Ardiles and the new wonder boy Diego Maradona, plus news and reviews from Cesar Menotti.
See, I take a bit of an exception to this because it says 24 pages, only £1.35. And this magazine is, I think, 52 pages, and it's 22 pence.
Yeah.
And that is just about one team, the Argentinian team, and it's like, I don't think that's value for money. I don't see that as value for money.
Well, you would think about it, the value for money now. £1.38, you couldn't get a first-class stamp. They're going to deliver it to you as well, you know. So, you're probably right enough. But when I look through some of the old programmes, 3 pence and 8 pence for games in the 1970s, it, you know, I don't know if it was a big seller or no. You'd be able to tell me better than that, Andy, you know. But that doesn't seem like a lot of money now.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is, you know, a collector now would probably pay about 20 or 30 quid off eBay for that book. So, yeah, it's all about what you want, isn't it?
Yeah. When this magazine was out, it was, you know, when Shoot magazine was out every week like that, you know, and to get your paper, and that's what everybody did in the mornings. Didn't matter where you were going to work. If I was going to work at Celtic Park when I was a young player in there, or whether men were going to work in the Ravenscraig Steelworks at the same time, they were making their way. You know, you went in for whatever you want, you know, your stuff. But the Shoot magazine was next to all the papers. It was next to the Record, the Daily Express and everything else. And everybody bought a paper going to work in the morning. I don't see a bloody newspaper now, you know. You're hard pressed. Somebody like myself, as I mentioned to you earlier on, technological dinosaur, still needs a newspaper. But people just don't seem to buy them like that. And when I would go in and get mine, so it was a Wednesday, it was always out, the Shoot magazine. When I would go in, I'd buy the Shoot magazine, take it in with me, with my newspaper, to my work in the morning and bring it back out. So everybody was interested in football, or even people that were involved in football, they bought the magazine all the time. So 22, I couldn't even tell you. If they said to me what the price was, Andy, I probably wouldn't have been able to guess, but 22 is not a lot of money.
No.
for the content as well.
Well, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, pages 6 and 7. Big across the 2 pages there is Ray Wilkins' column, the day we smashed Liverpool.
Yeah.
Remember Ray Wilkins much as a player, Andy?
I do. Seen quite a bit of him as well. Ray Wilkins, I admired immensely. Because if you look at Ray Wilkins, fantastic football player. But the biggest thing of the whole lot was his CV. What a CV he had. You know, you could only dream about that as a wee boy who wanted to make their way in football. You know, just have a look one day. Run it up again, Andy, on your computer and have a look at his CV and see the clubs that he played for.
Yeah.
The best clubs in Europe throughout. So many international caps.
Right,
Just a CV to die for, without a shadow of a doubt. And he was a smashing football player. And I met him a few times, lucky enough. I met him once at Ibrox with Ali McCoy. He was a gentleman, an absolute gentleman. Real nice fella to talk to. One of the guys you could stand with a glass of wine in your hand and have a right good conversation. You know, he was open to all sorts in the conversation as well, very knowledgeable. And I always thought he was very good on TV. I thought he was a class act on TV at that time when, you know, guys like Ray Wilkins and that were getting involved in doing that. But, well, you would have paid $1 or $2 for his CV, don't worry about that. His bank manager would be absolutely delighted with Ray Wilkins. He was...
I'll read through them in a wee second, but you're talking about him on TV. I always loved when he was on Italian football, where he was always talking to the kids that were watching and telling them this is what to do, you know, follow the example of this. And I always liked that. Always, you know, it wasn't just about explaining, you know, just saying what was going on in the game. It was actually about teaching youngsters. And
yeah,
I always
with a great insight.
Yeah. So here are some of the clubs: Chelsea, Man United, AC Milan, Paris Saint-Germain, Rangers, QPR, Crystal Palace, Hibs, Millwall, and Leyton Orient. Okay, we can forget about some of the later ones there.
I
disregard that Hibs more. Throw them out the window right away.
Yeah, England as well. He's managed at many clubs, but yeah, I mean, just that's exceptional.
That was a real CV at the time when I played football. You know, the things were just out with the bounds of most people. I know Gary Lineker went to Barcelona, and a lot of the boys soon as went out to Italy, and Ritchie was Ritchie was in Italy for 20 minutes as well. So, you know, they did, but that was, you know, if you look at that, because he spent, in footballing terms, considerable amount of time at these clubs that he was there, you know, the big clubs. So it wasn't any sort of fly-by-night, flash in the pan routine. He went there, produced stuff at every club that he played at. And he was a quality football player. I knew a very good friend of his, a fellow called Tommy Langley, who played for Chelsea at the same time when Ray Wilkins, he actually captained that Chelsea team at 18 years of age. And I'd met him a few times in London with Tommy, and he liked the social afternoon as well, Butch, you know, and so did Tommy, and I quite liked it myself. So we used to spend some nice afternoons at Goodwood and Kempton Park, you know. Nice fella, good fella, and top player.
So his article there is about what he did basically during these summer holidays, the closed season and the pre-season. Talks about where his holiday resorts, and he also talks about having to watch his weight and always putting on weight when he comes back. How were you, Andy, for your closed season and you're coming back to pre-season training?
I loved it. Absolutely fantastic. I just to count the last week of my holiday down, thinking 7 days, 6 days. You know, never put an ounce on. I was out every morning running in Girvan Beach, and less of that shit since you. We're not going down the road with that. I hated pre-season. Detested it for the very first one that I ever did. Pre-season was entirely different to the pre-seasons we see now, which is basically a fortnight, go away on holiday, come back, and you're given some training schedule and diet sheet, and don't come back 2 kilos of what you leave. We didn't. We had 6. At the start at Celtic Park, I remember one of my first pre-season getting 10 weeks holiday. You know, and that was, imagine getting 10 weeks holiday now. But that was the opportunity to recover at that time. You know, they didn't ask you to do anything. They just said go away and relax and get all the aches and pains and get all the knocks and the bumps that you've probably carried with you all season, and just go and enjoy yourself. Do the things that you're not able to do while you're involved in the football season. you never seen a football for about 4 weeks of day 10. I was just running up and down hills and Bonington Moor golf course. And it was, you put in the mileage with it, and it was the agony of a long distance runner. That's what it was. And you'd be about 6 weeks in before they'd finally bring a bag of balls out one morning. And then they would leave them lying for about 2 hours and wouldn't allow you to use them. They were only teasing you a wee bit. The boys were out the day, we're going to get a kick at the ball, and they would leave it to the following day, that was. But, I wasn't too bad at Celtic Park, but I suffered a wee bit because we were part-time at Morton. So I didn't have the full calendar year of being a full-time player. And in my second year going back, I had some problems. Well, I didn't have problems. I discovered Smirnoff, and it didn't go very well with Guinness. So I'd put on quite a bit of weight. And I remember the club sending me to a place called Stobo Castle Health Farm. And Jimmy, can't remember his second name. Jimmy Steele took me down, left me at the front door, and came back and picked me up in 10 days' time, and I had lost 1 stone and 4 pounds. So I'd left Capello, returned 10 days later. All the players thought I was down at Newcastle for exciting with Newcastle United. I was at Stobo Castle, and I lost 1 stone and 2 pounds. Came back up and opened the season at Celtic Park, scored. And the players thought I was unwell. All my teammates thought I was unwell. I'd lost 1 stone and 3 pounds or something. Thought there was something wrong with me. And went back down, had another 3 or 4 days at Stobo Castle after that game. Came back up and I'd lost 1.5 stone. And that's how I got rid of the weight that year. So the following pre-season, I thought I'd do the same again, but it didn't work out that way. No. It cost them too much money the first time, so they weren't going to do it a second time. But that was the way I used to have to suffer it, and I was prone to putting weight on at that time, and that's got to be the understatement of the day. You'll not hear more an understatement than that. The day I was prone to putting weight on, I played up around about the 14 and a half, 14, then between 14 and a half and 14.10 was my weight for playing. So I was always a big fella anyway. And I found it difficult to move that when I did put it on during the summertime. It took me about two months into the season before I get back to any kind of shape at all.
So you survived Ghislaine Sands with
Yep.
Jock Wallace when you were at Motherwell. What was that like?
Well, I had signed that morning, and Big Jock had just arranged that day to take all the players away. So Big Jock done that at Rangers, and it was highly successful. You got great press, and you get into the players' heads at that time at Ibrox that was to be important. That Gullen Sands and doing all that, and made a big thing about it. But by the time it had got to me and Big Jock and that at Motherwell, it was merely how can I put it? It was merely a gimmick. It was merely we thought I'm getting in the termed as being the laziest player in the Premier League. We'll organise Gullen and I'll take him up there. It was hard. Yeah. It was difficult. But the players at Motherwell before that hadn't seen Gullen. So it was a PR stunt, get all the press boys up and take photos of Andy Kidden on, he's been sick after it and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But we never went again. Right. So, that was the way Big Jock was at that time. He wanted people to read things about Motherwell, especially if Motherwell made a signing like that. It was important for that to happen. But Gullen was all right. That was okay.
So he was just looking to kill that story about you being lazy and unfit and things like that. With that.
Well, what he was saying more or less was, I'll sort Andy Ritchie out. Right. And I thought, that's great. I don't mind that, It showed that he cared a wee bit. And he'd been chasing me for a long time at Capello. I'd heard before the end of that season. And the only thing I had done with him and sorted out, the only thing I could do in my contract at that time was that the money I was earning at Capello was based on Premier League football. So if we didn't stay in the Premier League, I could move. And that was the only decent thing I'd done in that contract. So we got relegated that year, so it meant that I could move on, And that's what happened. Big Jock had spoken to me before the end of the season, and then he made a bid, even before pre-season started. But Morton wouldn't let me go, and it was only for £30,000. So we'd come for £1 million to £30,000, which is a fair old trap. But they still wouldn't let me go. I couldn't understand. So I fell out with everybody again and done all that nonsense, complaining about it. And then I get the phone call that morning to meet up with Hal, and we went to Motherwell and done the deal. And it wasn't until he came out to Motherwell, and I said to him, "What did you hold on at the end and make all that nonsense start up all over again for?" He says, "We're in the process of selling season tickets to our supporters, and he says we've got the majority of them all away now, so they didn't want to announce the fact that I was moving on until they'd sold 80% of their season tickets." I thought, even at the last day down there, they're trying to stuff it up me, held it off till they got the season tickets away. But I enjoyed my spell with Big Jock at Motherwell. I really did. What he told me was what he was going to do. He played me a couple of games early on in the League Cup, and then he left me out, and I had to go and work on my own to get fit again with the late Joe Wark, who was a coach out there. And we were working 2, sometimes 3 times a day out there. And I was in good nick again. I was just beginning to come round. I had the wee cartilage operation done and tidied my knee up. Really beginning to enjoy my football again. And then Rangers come in and took Big Jock back to Ibrox. And we brought a manager in, Bobby Robson, who, well, for the first day I arrived, let it be known he didn't like me. So I wasn't going to be playing in his team. So all of a sudden, if I go in there and get myself fit and getting ready to play, and then Big Jock leaving to more or less being told that, "Nah, you're not wanted here." That was. But I enjoyed my time with Big Jock. What is it to say? He did what he said on the tin.
Yeah.
He didn't muck about. He didn't kid on. His tactics were anything special. I remember a guy called Tommy O'Hara said to me, Tommy played at Motherwell at that time. He says, "I don't know why you're here." How's that? He says, "Because Big Jock loves football players." He says he loves right good football players, but he just doesn't like them in his team. He says, "So all you're farrying about and doing what you're going to do is really going to get them going, But it didn't work out that way.
Aye.
I played in the middle of the park a few games with a very young Gary McAllister. Who, even at 17, you could see the quality in Gary McAllister. And a wee boy in the middle of the park called Ali Moughlan, who was a right industrious wee midfield player. Both of them went to Leicester and later on in their careers as well together, but they were a good partnership. And I managed to fit into that, not too bad. So I enjoyed my spell at Motherwell with Big Jock.
Yeah.
The spell at Motherwell I had with Bobby Watson after that was enough to make me quit the game.
It's crazy going from that, as you say, getting to love the game again and playing, and suddenly to have it ripped away from you, and you think,
it was massive for me. I've stated publicly as well that for an early age in my footballing career, I had problems with my mental health, and at that time, as you can well imagine, that was a major situation. I'd went from being the low, I'd been relegated at Morton to, I was a Motherwell supporter for I was a wee boy. My family are all Motherwell supporters. I bought 50 shares in Motherwell the day that I signed. I was just so delighted to be there. You mentioned that, Andy. I got my love back for the game again through Big Jock and, somebody having a wee bit of faith in me again. And then within the space of him going back to Ibrox and Bobby Watson coming in a week later, I'm more or less told that my services are only required. And I wouldn't play for Motherwell again, So football, for somebody with mental health problems at that time, was a roller coaster anyway, which just made this 100 times worse. I was really looking forward to getting back in and working with Big Jock. And, I don't think I played 2 games after I left Motherwell like that, and I finished at 27. But Motherwell was tin-lidded it for me, as they say.
Yeah.
It wasn't a situation that I had any control over. The manager just came in, and the manager's decision was final at that time.
Right, we move over to pages 8 and 9 then. So pages 8 and 9 is Freedom Their Goal is the heading, and it's all about the film Escape to Victory, which was being filmed at that point. The £5 million World War II prison escape film just finishing production in Budapest. And the highlight is a soccer match between the German national team and a side of prisoners captured by the Nazis. And there's a picture of a few of the stars there, Michael Caine, Pele, Sylvester Stallone, Bobby Moore,
Yep.
and Ozzy Ardiles.
Was there dealing? John Watt was in it as well.
Yeah.
So I'll move on to this. So I've got a full team photo.
Aye.
So we can zoom in a wee bit.
Where did that photograph come from?
So that was in Shoot. That was a different magazine. It wasn't in this one, but I thought I would include it because it's an absolute brilliant. It's a brilliant photograph. So we've got in there Russell Osman, Paul Van Himst, Mike Summerby, Sylvester Stallone, John Wark, Kazi Denya, Soren Lindstedt, Halvar Thorsen, Ozzy Ardiles, Michael Caine, Pele, Bobby Moore, and Co Prince. It's a pretty, apart from obviously Sylvester Stallone, who was absolutely shocking. His goalkeeping technique was absolutely abysmal in that. It's a pretty good team.
He made Roy Baines look like a goalkeeper. Yeah, it's what some big names there. It just shows you, they've looked at that time, and they've been scouring Europe. Now, with all due respect, you think about Europe now, and if you'd put up a team like that, there would be probably 9 Europeans and South Americans that we all know instantly by looking at their pictures, And to be honest with you, even at that time, Co Prince, I wouldn't have known who Co Prince was. Kazi Denya, I know. Did Kazma Denya not come and play for Aberdeen at one time?
Don't know. I think he was
Man City.
Man City. At some point,
Man City, that's right. And I think, funny enough, he was, well, I don't mean funny enough, but yeah, I think he died in a car crash as well, if my memory serves me correct. And he was a fantastic player. Soren Lundstedt, not really household names. They would be household names now, but at that time. But this film's out maybe 2 or 3 times a year now, isn't it? It's a bit like Spartacus. It appears on your telly and you've seen it and you know every bit about it, and yet you still watch it again. It's one of these films. It's compulsive viewing. Some of it's that bad, it's compulsive viewing as well, You're right.
I think it was a lot of it was filmed actually in Norfolk, so that's why there was the Ipswich connection. It's because it was getting filmed down that way. But great. It seems to be one of those movies. It's just turned into a cult movie, and I really enjoy it.
But yeah, I quite enjoy it. Yeah. I enjoy it as well. Some of the footballing bits in it, Pele with the old Mansfield Hotspurs on, the old laced up boots in the front like that. And Bobby Moore wasn't much of an actor as well. Great captain, but not much of an actor.
Yeah, and I hear John Wark's single line was dubbed because he couldn't understand him. That's what I hear. Although I don't really remember that at the moment when you watch it. I don't remember it feeling dubbed or anything like that. But there we go.
I thought he got the bit because of his silly hairstyle and that big moustache that he had. He looked like a football player for the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah.
Aye. The acting was shocking in it, but. Yeah, the story was good, wasn't it? And there was a happy ending at the end. That's all that mattered. Yeah.
So what about yourself? Have you ever been close to appearing, like a Shot at Glory or something like that? Have you ever been close to appearing in any football movies or any movies at all?
I don't really know any other ones other than that one.
Have you not seen a Shot at Glory? The one with Alan McCoist, the Robert Duvall. I mean, there we go. There's 2 of the top people in it, Robert Duvall and Alan McCoist.
I haven't seen that film, so I've got to be honest. I've never seen it. John McVeigh used to try and get me to see it all the time. He used to ask me, you not seen that film yet? I think John was in it as well.
He did a pretty good part in it, yeah.
He did a good part in it. But so he tells me he was a good actor as well, John McVeigh, but I've never seen it. That's the only footballing movie that I ever remember sitting down to watch.
It's difficult. It's difficult getting the feel of, whether it be football, whether it be American football or anything like that. It's difficult to get it right in movies, and I think especially with football, it needs to be played. Because one of my things about A Shot of Glory is I think the football scenes are really good in it, and a bit slowed down, but they feel quite realistic and such that you maybe think they said, just go out and play a game of football and we'll take some of the the shots and make it all work. Whereas, you know, in Escape to Victory, you've got Pelé doing that flick with his heels over the head and stuff, and it's all slow motion, and it doesn't feel like football.
Yeah. Pelé looked like an ordinary player in that film. That was the problem. It was manufactured out like that. You know, you didn't really. For a guy that was brought up, me as a young boy, my only football being when I went to the cinema and the Pathy News used to show the old football reels during that. That was my first introduction to watching football on telly. You know, and that took me back to that. You know, there when I was thinking about that film, it was all manufactured stuff. You know, Bobby Moore pointing and, you know, putting his horn up and telling him, you know, I don't think I ever saw Bobby Moore do that once in his whole career, you know. And as you said, Pelé, and Ardele's doing the wee flicks as well. You know, but I think they're hard to do, these sports movies. You know, I really do, to grab the concept of what you're trying to portray on the screen like that. And football must be the worst of the lot to do it with, you know. I think. Sorry, Andy. I think you've just got to step back when you watch something like this or A Shot of Glory. You've got to step back and say, "Listen, I'm not watching a documentary. I'm watching a piece of entertainment. So that's the only way I'm going. I'm not going to Barry Norman it or Jonathan Ross it, and think about the photography and the lighting and stuff. I'm just going to watch it and enjoy it, and that's what I do with these sort of things." I did with that. I remember really enjoying it. As I said to you, great story, great ending. That's what you want in any film, isn't it? Yeah. It's something that you can engage with. You can engage with them because, you know, you didn't really see as much about footballers out with the footballing context. Yeah. You know, something different like that, being in a movie and, you know, having a bit of a story attached to it, you know, you can get involved a wee bit more with it, you know. Yeah, absolutely. And I like Michael Caine. He was brilliant. What a player he was. Aye. Sure, he must have had a career with Leyton Orient or something.
Don't know. What was your thoughts on the movie, Tom?
I enjoy it. I have not seen it for a few years, but it's one of those ones that comes on the bank holiday or something like that, isn't it? And of course, there's too many good faces in it as well. It just makes it entertaining. Apparently, Sylvester Stallone wanted to score the winning penalty, and somebody sort of had to explain to him that goalkeepers don't really take penalties. So I know
a bit like Robert Duvall's stuff in the other movie you're talking about as well. You know, everybody explain everything to him before it happened.
Well, in that one, Robert Duvall obviously based his whole role on like Bob Shankly or something. You know, one of the Shankleys. That sort of approach to it that he did. But for me, it was all right. His Scottish accent wasn't the best, but it was who else? Michael Keaton was in it as well, and Michael Keaton just hammed it right up. You know, and he was my disappointment for that movie. He was my disappointment. I would have hoped for better from that. But you should watch it, Andy. Honestly, there's loads of Scottish football names in it. I can't even think off the top of my head some of them, but yeah, it's really good. I would recommend you watch it. I'll tell you what, I'll give you a link to it, a wee special link to it, so you can watch it on the fly as well.
Well, somebody will need to set that up for me. They do.
Aye.
I know you've made a wee appearance in theatre though, Andy, haven't you?
Yes, stage screen and musical, Tom.
Yes, I think it was David Carswell's play, Mon the Ton.
Yes,
right.
Yeah. I had been doing some stuff with David for some promotional stuff for it. I'd never met the guy before, and he had came up to Belsalm and picked me up. We did some video promotional stuff, and we're talking about, you know, going back in time. Al McGraw was there. Both did Capo in the boardroom, and I got chatting with Dave on the way down and up in the car. As I say, I'd never met him before, and we're talking in general about what was going to be happening. The night before, I'd been with my pal Tony Roper,
right.
Jamesy Cotter, and Jamesy says, "What, are you in the play?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, it's a play about Morton, and you must be in it." I said, "No." I said, "I'm just going down to talk about Morton and a wee bit about the play and a promotional." And I mentioned to Davy Carswell that. And he phoned me. He dropped me off and then he phoned me about an hour later. He says, "Andy, do you mind if I put a wee bit into the play, a wee we slot in the play and you maybe even come in and do a wee cameo role for us. So that's how it all came round a bit. Davey rewrote wee bits of the play, and I did a wee cameo bit about 1976 and how things at Morton had been particularly well for a few seasons before that with the club, and from 76 to 1980 is considered by a lot of people down there to be the best years that they had for a long, long time. So that was the way he worked it in, and yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good fun, and the rest of the cast and everybody there were brilliant because they knew I knew the centre of a donut about acting or trying to put on something on the stage. So I thought, we'll just kick that into touch right away and I'll just be me because that's who I'm playing anyway. Yeah. So I buggered about some of the lines that Davey had written for me as well. And we managed to get through it. And I think people enjoyed it. We had 3 great nights down at the Beacon Theatre down in Greenup, full houses for the people. They enjoyed it and we had a bit of laugh and a sing-song. I love a sing-song. So we had that at the end of it as well. Really enjoyable. I'm doing it again, by the way.
Right.
So April next year?
April next year. But I hope I'm getting the starring role this time,
We'll maybe get you and Davey on at the time to talk about it then.
Yeah. He's a good man, Carswell. He does well. He's a talented fella. I just got a wee message from him. He's invited me along for the opening night of the Tommy Burns show at Celtic Park, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. Thomas was Palonines, and quite rightly, something like this has cropped up. It's a great idea for Davey, on a great subject, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I don't know nothing at all about it. I'm just going to turn up I don't know one word that's been written. I'm just going to turn up, and hopefully, I'm sure I will enjoy every minute like everybody else.
Right, great. Well, we move over then the next couple of pages 10 and 11. So the big headline there is Ray Kennedy to quit Liverpool. So for me, Ray Kennedy was one of the unsung heroes of that great Liverpool team in the 70s and 80s. So a guy in the centre of the midfield there. Do you remember much about him, Andy?
Yeah. I remember the great spell at Arsenal. Absolutely fantastic. One of the modern day, left-sided midfield players. Could play and use the ball in the middle of the park, but one of his main assets that he had was, his power in the air and his support for midfield to get up in the box and scored some magnificent goals and was a success everywhere he went. Big player for everybody. He was a top-class player down there as well. He was one of the boys that, you could see moving about at that time because there was a lot of shuffling of money down in England at that time. One club would spend something and then one club would spend the money that they gave them, and that's the way it worked in there,
I think Brian Clough said at one time if somebody cashed one of the cheques, the whole game would go bankrupt.
That's what would happen. It was passed. Well, he probably stated it with the cheques, but it was passed on with the money. As soon as a club sold somebody and got some money in, right away they wanted to use it and they brought somebody else. So there was a merry-go-round of the whole thing, If 2 or 3 clubs did deals in, some of the smaller clubs got a wee bit as well if they were interested. But that was where the money was generated then. The big money, sorry. I don't know where the money comes now for football transfer money, but at that time it went round about half a dozen, maybe 8 clubs, and everybody wanted a wee bit of it, But he was a super, super player. I enjoyed his spell at Arsenal. With Kennedy, I really did. I thought he was good everywhere, but he was extra special there.
So we note there it says both Kennedy and Terry McDermott want to play abroad have 1 year of their existing contracts with Liverpool to fulfil. I think Ray Kennedy ended up playing at Swansea, and I believe Terry McDermott played a wee time in Cyprus towards the end of his career.
I see the Shoot magazine got it right again there, didn't they? Wanted to finish at the top.
So, Andy Smith, have you spotted anything else on those 2 pages? Will there be snippets?
Let me see what I've picked out. So this one,
like Sam Allardyce there.
Aye.
Yeah.
He's moved to Sunderland, I think, from Bolton. But he feels sorry that he's moved because what was it he says about it? He was letting Derby County down. So Derby County were in for him as well, but he moved to Sunderland instead, and he just says he feels terrible. I think the Derby County manager didn't feel too good about it and thinks he was tapped up a bit, or
he liked a wage packet out of the game, Big Sam, didn't he?
Aye.
Some moves as a player, and he'd even more moves as a manager, you know.
But one of the ones I'm just picking out is this: Ballymena United's Northern Ireland youth international midfield prospect Tony McCall, and they're spelled it McCaul. But I saw an article in the Belfast Telegraph, and they spelled it McCall. So I don't know if one is an Irish spelling of it. But he was Ulster's Young Player of the Year in 1980, and his promising teenage cousin Gervais McCall, who also operates in midfield with Newry Juniors, Hereford United, is currently interested in Man United. Now, Tony McCall is apparently likened to Brian Robson, not just skill-wise, but also he liked to go in where it hurts. So he actually ended up injuring himself quite a lot by the challenges he was putting in. He did get frustrated by all his injuries, and he moved to the USA to do some coaching, and he's apparently there even now still coaching. He's 112 appearances for Ballymena, scored 7 goals. So I thought that was just a wee interesting thing. Another one that I looked at was former Aberdeen fullback Steve Ritchie, and look how they've spelt Ritchie there, Andy. Missing out the T.
That happens to me regular.
Has joined Yeovil Town after being given a free transfer from Torquay United. Steve, the brother of Bristol City Tom, turned down a move to 4th Division side Doncaster Rovers to join the Lions League. So Steve was born in Edinburgh, played for Bristol City, played for Morton, Hereford, Aberdeen, Torquay United, and then on to Yeovil Town.
He was the guy that scored the winning goal for Aberdeen against Rangers that day and swung on the crossbar.
Was it a winning goal? Did Rangers not win 2-1 that game? I think that was the... It was the one he missed hit, and Peter McCullough was absolutely. But right. I thought Rangers won that game. Did they not?
They maybe have, they could have done. He played at Morton as a left fullback, and I played against his brother Tom when he played at Bristol. When I was at Morton, we played them a couple of times in the Anglo-Scottish Cup.
Right.
He was a good striker, good goal scoring striker for Bristol. But I think Stevie Ritchie was down there at Morton for a season and a half before he went to Aberdeen.
He was at Hereford. He went to Hereford in between Morton and Aberdeen.
Right.
But Tom Ritchie, as you say, he was at Bristol City twice. The second spell he was managed by Terry Cooper, who recently passed away as well. That's the ones I've picked out from there, Tom. I don't know if you want to, if there's anything
As we
else.
at the bottom of page 10, it says Baker's back. Joe Baker, the former Hibs, Notts Forest and Arsenal centre forward, who was one of the first British players to sample Italian football with a spell at Turin, has taken his first steps towards a managerial career by becoming manager-coach to the East of Scotland junior side, Fauldhouse United. Just surprising, like a guy that's a big player with all that experience.
Fantastic fella, Tom. Absolutely fantastic guy. I was lucky enough to meet him. I went to the latter stages of my career when I had a couple of months before I'd taken up a job down in London, I got an offer I couldn't refuse from a guy called Tommy Fagan at Albion Rovers. I think he offered me something like 18 quid a week to go and be the player manager for a couple of weeks at Albion Rovers, which I did. I don't know, I must have been unwell at that time when I took that job, you know. And when I got out there was a guy there, Joe Baker, and he'd been there for a wee while, Joe, helping out and doing whatever. I didn't know Joe Baker, but I knew all about his career. A bit earlier than Ray Wilkins, but, you know, just look at some of the teams that he'd played for. And he was there, and Joe was doing everything there. Trainer, coach, sponge man, cleaned up the dressing rooms, he'd done everything. A lovely, lovely fella. And he worked me there for about 6 or 8 weeks, and I got to know him really well. Great insight for the game. He knew the game inside out. Life hadn't been particularly good to him at that time, you know. Maybe, Joe had a wee bit of a drinking problem, and he was in the process of trying to sort that out at that time. He had joined AA and was working really hard at trying to do that again, trying to get his life back in order again. And I remember after about 6 weeks, I I couldn't take any more of Tommy Fagan or Albion Rovers, you know. And I went in to resign, and Joe was there, and Joe says, "Oh, I don't want you to go, Andy. I'm enjoying this building here." I says, "No, Joe, you go in and take this job now and continue to do what you're doing, and things will be brilliant, you know." But I remember thinking to myself, that was a guy who achieved a lot of things in the game and really didn't know how good he was. I always got that feeling off Joe Baker. He was I don't know whether it's just because he was a shy fella, you know, but he really didn't know how well he was thought of in the game and how well people would look at his career in the game and admire it as well. He just wanted to be involved in football, and he wanted to be involved in about football people. And that was helping him get his life back in order as well, you know. And Joe did stay on. I can't remember who came in at the back. Davy Provan, ex-Rangers man, came in, and him and Joe got Albion Rovers promotion. I think the following season after that, you know, which hadn't been heard of for 50 years in Coatbridge. But, you know, Joe Baker, just loved the fella. I would love to have been round about Joe. I used to meet him in Motherwell. He stayed in Wishaw. I'd meet him and his wife when we were out shopping and what have you, and a great half-hour's conversation. Brighten up your day, Joe Baker. Lovely fella.
So top of page 11 there, we've got Ian Botham should retire. England cricket captain Ian Botham should hang up his soccer boots. That is the view of Ray Illingworth, the former Test star who now manages Yorkshire. Illingworth says of Botham's decision to play for Scunthorpe United again next season to risk injury at such an important stage of his career seems pointless. I appreciate that Ian relishes a challenge, but it doesn't matter whether he measures up to 4th Division standards or not. He's putting his main job on the line for a few games of football. Ian could be earning $50,000 a year as captain of England. He has the cricket world at his feet, and I fear that some Division 4 defender may put Ian out of the winter tour of the West Indies starting early next year. So yeah, that was it. Ian Botham would play for Scunthorpe United in the cricket off-season.
He's actually wearing a Chelsea shirt there, so I don't know if that was a testimonial or something he's played in. Maybe.
Just a charity game or something.
I've been round about the game for 50 years and I've never ever spoke to anybody in football I've ever seen Ian Botham play. You know, I don't know whether that's one of these spoof things that people just put up at that time, you know. I don't know anybody ever said, I remember going to Scunthorpe one night to see Scunthorpe and Oldham and Ian Botham was playing. That's a line I've never heard. Yeah.
I'm sure I remember at the time, Andy, on the news and stuff, or you know, on sports things about that. And I have seen other photographs and things of him in action. I don't know if I've seen any video of it, but I remember at the time this being a thing. Ian Botham was playing football as well as cricket.
Yes, interesting.
I remember reading about it. I remember hearing about it.
Yeah.
You know, never seen. You know, you see a picture like that there. So obviously, tells you he was in a football strip at one time. But don't know. Could you tell me what position he played?
I think it was midfield. Was it?
Was it? Oh. But it's just one of them. I think to myself, and I like that wee bit where it says he could be earning £50,000 a year. Some obscure wee right back at a 2nd Division club down in England's on 50 grand a week now. You know, that just shows you how life and football has moved on considerably. 50 grand a week in the Championship's a poor wage now. And the top cricketer in the world, more or less, was getting £50,000 a year.
The Scottish FA are planning a crackdown on tour companies who advertise package deals for Scotland games abroad. They will not issue them with tickets. Only members of the Scottish Travel Club will get tickets for games abroad, says SFA Secretary Ernie Walker. So that was back then, them taking control over the whole...
Nothing's changed in Scottish football.
Yep. Was there anything? No, that was the only stuff from there.
So over the next page there, we get Tartan Talk with Danny McGrain. And he's talking about all-weather pitches, no thanks. And there's a picture there of Trevor Francis playing for the Detroit Express there in America. And first paragraph is an experiment at Helenvale Park in the east end of Glasgow. Once a favourite training spot for Celtic, could mean that senior football matches in Scotland need never be postponed because of bad weather. At least that is the possibility of distant conclusion after the opening of the £250,000 AstroTurf playing surface, which is only a long goal kick from Celtic Park. Did you play in many AstroTurf pitches in your career, Andy?
No, I don't think I played a football game on an AstroTurf pitch. I need to be corrected, but I don't think I did. They were relatively, well, in America at that time. You know, I remember it. You know, I nearly made it. I nearly made it again to New York Cosmos at the time when Eddie Fermani was the manager and he was a pal of Hal Stewart's, and they wanted to take players out in the summertime and play there. And obviously they played on AstroTurf across there. You know, Pelé and Beckenbauer and Carlos Alberto and all these guys were still there. You know, it was footballing circus they were playing at that time. They played on AstroTurf. But the Scottish FA cancelled all the temporary work permits that year. The last one to get a work permit that year was Bobby Lennox, who went out to Houston. And I remember sitting up at Park Gardens. Alfie Conn and me were sitting up at Park Gardens waiting to get our temporary transfer signed to go. And they stopped giving them out. Too many players were abusing the system. You were getting signed for £1 with New York, and then they would sell you back at the end of their season to Morton for £1. And the SFA cancelled all temporary work transfers. I think Alfie was going to Toronto or somewhere like that, and I was going to go to New York. So that would have been about the only time. So I never played a professional match on them. But I think I would have liked the AstroTurf. I remember playing many, many games for the legendary club Ducal Pumferson, Sawmill and Tannery, nil. And we used to get taken to AstroTurf parts because our old legs couldn't handle the grass anymore. And I quite enjoyed it. The ball sat upright. You could control the ball. If you can control it and pass it, you'll always play on that surface. And I was nearly into my 40s by that time, but I enjoyed it. And, well, I see the championship. I see a bit of championship football now, and we've got Accies now coming down in Kilmarnock. Who would ever thought? I would never have thought Kilmarnock would ever be played on AstroTurf. Never thought Accies would ever play professional games on AstroTurf. 40 years later, you know, we're looking at the vast majority of parks now in Scotland as being AstroTurf parks.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes sure that the games are going to be on every Saturday because you got AstroTurf, Tom, but it helps. But I would have enjoyed it. I don't think a lot of players from my era would have enjoyed playing in AstroTurf, though.
So I read, Andy, about the possibility of you going to the States, and you would have joined George Best there at the time, I think. Is that right?
No, Best was in Florida.
Right.
He was in Florida with Gerd Muller at Tampa Bay with Rodney Marsh. Now, the Americans had Yashin in goals, Carlos Alberto, Beckenbauer, an Italian striker up front, Bogdanovic. They had a big Yugoslavian. Dennis Stewart from Manchester City was there at New York at the time as well. What they were doing was New York Cosmos were playing the old supporters game. If you had a community in New York, for talk's sake, the Brazilian community and the Spanish or the Yugoslavians, a lot of Yugoslavians at that time in New York, they picked, in inverted commas, the best player in the country, and they brought them to New York so they encouraged that community to buy tickets for the New York Cosmos game. Yeah. That was the way they did it. And that's why, you know, they had a broad cross-section of people from all over the world. You know, they didn't have enough American players at that time, certainly do now. But they bring it in based on how big your community was in New York to see whether you could sell tickets or not. Pelé sold it across the range of that, but, you know, they tried to keep it a Yugoslavian. The Italian Bogdanovic, his brother controlled the mafia there in New York, so he was a big signing for them as well. And Eddie Fermani, the English manager, he was manager at Cosmos at that time.
Yeah, I actually mentioned what you're talking about there. I don't know if you read it further in this magazine, where Rodney Marsh has quit at New York because the owners tried to force him to play more Spanish players so they could get more of the local Spanish community in through the doors. And I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, it just backs up what you said there.
Yeah, that was the way they worked it, you know. I think Bobby Lennox went to Philadelphia, if my memory serves me correct. And my old pal Jimmy Bone, he had a great time up there. And I think he was in Toronto. He was with Toronto Blizzard. with an old buddy of mine who passed away there, Bobby Prentice, that used to play with Hearts, left winger.
Yeah.
The two of them, and Drew Busby. The three of them played out there for a while there in Toronto. And they had some time out there, I'll tell you. That was where they come up with the original phrase, drink Canada dry. They three were trying to do it, you know.
So what was it that made it not happen for you, Andy, going out to the States?
They wouldn't allow temporary transfers.
Right. So
it meant that you had to buy the player outright.
Okay.
You know, and Eddie Fermanagh had said something like, we'll give £50,000 for the player. We're back to that old one again, you know. £50,000 was never going to be enough. It was more or less to, you know, you were getting a real bucket of cash at that time for doing it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I was fiddling about for £110 a week down at Capello, where I could have went to America for £900 a week, you know. That was the way it was working. Play through the summer season, make a few bob out of it, come back a better person for it, you know.
Yeah.
But the Americans didn't pay transfer fees. That they still don't to a certain extent. You know, they expect the player to be as big an earner as the club as well now, and did at that time. You know, they would have paid you good big salaries to go across there to America, but they don't pay transfer fees. So Hal was never going to say, well, he tried to work a wee deal, you know, a wee gentleman's agreement with Eddie to make sure that, you know, if they gave him 50,000, Eddie would give him the £50,000 back. But I think Eddie Fermanagh was just as big a con man as Hal Stewart, so neither the two of them could trust each other. Yeah. So it never happened. Right. It never happened. And as I say, the temporary transfers were cut for about 4 years.
All right.
Yeah, all right. Well, there's a nice wee advert there for Adidas tracksuits and T-shirts and trainers.
Mm-hmm.
On that page there.
Yeah, I just want to zoom in and seeing the guy on the left. I want to zoom in on him because I think he looks a bit like. Who do we think he looks like?
Good question.
Well,
no David Dodds anyway.
Well, I say Tom Cruise. He looks a bit like Tom Cruise.
Oh yeah. You good. Good kit that, isn't it? It's good gear.
Brilliant gear.
The young ones are now beginning to discover it again, and you know, have a look at that gear and look at it properly. Now it's coming to the fore again. That and Puma. I see a lot of kids with Puma gear on as well now, and they were the two biggest. Adidas and Puma were the, you know, if you had Adidas gear and Puma gear, you were king of the hill at that time.
Right, so over on to pages 14 and 15. So page 15, two players you've mentioned earlier on. Andy Cyril Regis for West Brom and Terry Butcher for Ipswich Town in an unusual orange and black away kit.
That's good stuff, that, isn't it?
Two of them battling for the ball there. And if we just go over again then, Andy, unless you get in. So on the left-hand side there, the nice wee advert for Mitre trainers with David O'Leary of Arsenal.
Yeah. I don't know about the Mitre trainers, but at that time, you know, you wouldn't have called the Queen your auntie. You know, if you didn't have a pair of Adidas Samba, everybody wore them. They were the in thing, the three-striped Adidas Samba. I don't remember the Mitre ones right enough. I don't think you could buy them in Belsall at that time.
I think he's certainly earning his advertisement fee, isn't he? He's earning it with all the stretches and jumps and stuff like that. Nowadays, you would just have the photograph that's at the bottom, but they're getting him to do the bicycle, jump in the air, and I think, he's definitely earning that money.
Aye. I think when you look at it now, you think to yourself, how stupid does that look? But, you know, that's what photographers used to do way back then. They get you to do stupid things, something different.
Aye.
Every newspaper wanted something different.
Yeah.
So page 15, we're into Scottish football there. So first of all, we've got Alan Mccullough, Scotland's next keeper. So this is Alan Mccullough at Kilmarnock. Do you remember Alan Mccullough playing against him, Andy?
I do a couple of times. Didn't know the fella particularly well, you know, but I'm just looking through. They had a great thing, Kilmarnock, with Scottish goalkeepers, didn't they? When you look through the names, Ali Hunter. Yeah, I'm a very good friend of Ali's. He played at Celtic Park as well. He was a former Kilmarnock goalkeeper and Scotland goalkeeper as well. But they had always good background of goalkeepers at Kilmarnock. And Big Phil Allen was one of them. I see he's going to be tackled there. I had to get out the road here. That's Jimmy Melrose, and what a dirty wee bugger he was. He'd have been right out of the tap there. Good job that big fella's on the move, and Mello would have had him. I'll let you take that picture of the show, but he tackle in goalkeepers, centre halves, anybody at all. Jimmy Melrose, the only fella to make Celtic's worst ever team 3 seasons in the trot.
Oh dear.
I never let him forget that one.
Yeah.
He hates me for it.
So Alan, he played 440 league games for Kilmarnock between 73 and 90. He was out on loan for 10 games at St Mirren in 1978. Now, during that time, Middlesbrough were apparently looking at him, but they then went for Jim Stewart instead, who was the first team keeper at Kilmarnock. So Jim Stewart went, and Kilmarnock then recalled him back from St Mirren, so he missed out on that. But you're right, I mean, as you say, Ali Hunter, Jim Stewart, Alan McCullough, even though, as I'm sure you probably got on to talking, but it says Scotland's next keeper, he never got any caps. So he got one Scottish League 11 cap, one under 21 cap, and that was it. So it never worked out for him that way.
You can see the amount of good goalkeepers that were on the go around about that time up here, right enough, every club, well, it felt like every club had a very good goalkeeper, and every club's goalkeeper was attracting interest with down south. I think we had a glut of very, very good goalkeepers at that time. But Kilmarnock did. They always had a good production line of goalkeepers. I remember I can't remember who it was, but he ended up being in goal for Everton way back in the 60s as well, who played for Scotland. Name evades me at this moment in time. He was a Kilmarnock goalkeeper as well. Great list of club and international goalkeepers in there. I'm just reading through that article, that Alan McCullough's article there. Jock Stein selected him for the squad for the British Championship in the 2 tour games in Poland and Hungary.
You're looking for the Everton keeper there, Andy Smith?
McLaughlin.
McLaughlin, that was him, Sandy McLaughlin.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was that one or not. He was there way back in the 60s, wasn't he?
Aye, well, 69 he was at Kilmarnock, so it would have been, I guess, early 70s for. But he also, I remember seeing a photograph of him, and he's quite a rugged, sort of Robert Mitchum type look to him.
Aye, good job.
So.
I remember when Ali Hunter joined Celtic for Kilmarnock. I was still at Celtic Park at that time. And, Ali came in with a massive reputation like that. Really good goalkeeper. Very, very good goalkeeper. Full international at that time. Came in and did very well at the start of Celtic. And then, it tapered off a wee bit for him as well. I think after, 73 at Hampden when, who was the boy that hit the ball? Was it Nahoda? Had a crashing shot for 25 yards in the World Cup qualifiers, and Ali dropped it underneath his sons into the back of the net. Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
It might have been. And Ali's career went down after that for a while, and they couldn't really pick it back up again, Worked really, really hard, but it just seemed to be that, he wasn't the same goalkeeper for some reason or another. Strange breed goalkeepers.
Yeah.
Can change the wind from week to week. And Ali didn't achieve the same heights after that in the Czechoslovakia game it was than he had been before. They promised big things for Ali Hunter at Celtic Park. It didn't work out. Fine goalkeeper.
Right, we move on to the next article then. Here we
I
go.
know that guy.
So it's Andy Ritchie, the Morton maestro. And tell me, Andy, in that photograph, are you wearing Adidas Samba there?
That's it. That's where it reminded me this morning when I seen it. I've got the gutties on. That would be one of the games that, we would get a game on down at Capello when nobody else in the whole of the country would get a game on. Because Hal could sell it to STV and BBC and get the cameras done quick for Glasgow. And he did that a few times. We played Partick Thistle when it was the only game in Scotland. In fact, there was very few games in the whole of the country. And we had got the Adidas Samba. And we all had them, and Partick Thistle had just their boots. They didn't think the game would be on. So that was a body blow to them. But they were the big thing. If you owned a pair of Adidas Samba, you were king of the hill.
I think it's the same when we play in snow and things like that, and games like that don't go ahead nowadays. And when you look back at the old highlights and stuff of those games, I think we're missing. And I get that it can be dangerous travelling to the ground. It can be dangerous playing on that. But I think we miss out on so much with that. You know, it's like seeing just players sort of, you know, they shorten their strides because, you know, they don't want to slip and all that sort of stuff. I just think we miss out on, whether it's absolutely soaking and you kick the ball and it goes about half a metre and then it goes 10 centimetres. You know, I just think we're missing a lot out by not playing games in less than perfect, circumstances.
No, I think that's got a lot to the modern day pitches. Oh, they're like bowling greens, Andy. Absolutely fantastic. I never miss an opportunity to go out when I'm at football games if I'm lucky enough to be able to walk across the park. You know, it's manicured to perfection. Now, even I thought you were just being nice and not mentioning the fact that Capello, when I played down there, was a bit of a shithole as well because of that. We had 6 inches of muck all over the park at times, and when the Clyde would raise its water level at the side, it would all pour in through into Capello, and we'd have massive, big, muddy patches with no grass at all on the park, and you just had to go on with it. Players were adaptable then, you know. They just made the best of what situations there. If you've been watching the big match revisited, you know, my granddaughter's got me onto that, Kira, now watching the big match. Some of the parks, you know, if it was about half a dozen blades of grass on them, some of the players you've seen on it, you know, you talk about Rodney Marsh and Tony Curry and even Butch Wilkins there earlier on. They all guys come through all that. No grass on the park, muck up to your ankles. And Capello was like that. But then for about 2 months of the season, you'd get the really cold weather, and then the sambas would come out, and at least you would get the ball would bounce a wee bit rather than stick in the muck. But as I said, players were adaptable. It was like nowadays, they talk about the fitness of players now, guys. You know, the modern day player is, without a shadow of a doubt, and has been for a while now, fitter than the players for my era beyond. But we were fit for purpose. We were fit to play on parts like that, situations like that. You know, we weren't registered physiotherapists. Every modern day football player can tell you every injury he's had in his whole life, metatarsals and something else and something else. You know, we had a sore leg or a sore ankle or a sore knee. That was it in a nutshell. Nobody tell you any different. And you had to manage them. But we were fit for purpose to play on surfaces like that, like Capello. And, you know, even if you look through some of the old bits of footage that they got for Ibrox and Celtic Park for the days, they had very little grass on their park as well. That was just the way it was, and you had to go on with it. But hey, with some smashing players then, you know, with players who could control the ball in 6 inches of mud. That takes a bit of doing.
So that wee article there is basically saying that Morton were doing well, and then they've had a dip in fortune. Things went wrong, you're saying here, Andy, and it was difficult to pick up the thread. Oh no, so it says right back Davy Hayes. We lost a couple of games where things went against us, and it seems to get to us. For instance, we had an awful lot of play against Aberdeen in the League Cup semi-final, but at the end of the day, we were out of the tournament by the odd goal in 3.
Yeah, they were exciting times. I remember the couple of seasons like that, you know. And what nobody can understand now, and I say it often, and people probably get fed up listening to it, we were part-time. We were training on a Thursday night and a Tuesday night. You know, I was working in the meat market, carrying sides of beef round about and delivering them all to butcher shops over Scotland at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then down for training at night time on a Tuesday and a Thursday night at Capello. There was no preparation time for anything, you know. All the time I spent at Capello, I spent as a part-time player. I was never full-time. I never went back full-time again until I went to Motherwell. And what a difference that would have made to that squad of players that we had at Capello at that time. We had some fantastic players down there. Players who went on to have big careers down south from Morton. You know, we sold nearly all to West Ham and Joe McLaughlin to Chelsea and Jimmy Tolmie to Lochern in Belgium. We sold Mark McGee to Newcastle United. Massive, massive clubs. You know, if these boys had, and, you know, they were guys that were out working. You know, they went straight from their work to Capello. No time, you know, run around the track. There were no training facilities. You know, and you couldn't go in the park in case you wasted it. Not that you could have wasted it anyway, it was that bad. But that was your training schedule during the winter. Was running around the track for an hour and a half and maybe a wee five-a-side game at the end for 5 minutes. I know the rest of the clubs in the Premier League were off full time. You know, I had to ask for 2 days off my work. Hannibal's talking about the Cup semi-final. I had to get into the meat market and ask for a couple of days. We were going to Largs, big time, you know, to prepare for the Cup semi-final. And my guys in the meat market couldn't have cared less about Morton or what was going on. They just wanted people in there to do their shift. You know, go on with it. Can I get a couple of days off? No, if you take a couple of days off, you need to find another job, you know. That was the way it worked then. There were plenty of people looking for work at that time. But if we did get full-time football for a couple of seasons, we would have won something. We went out in that part that day and frozen that League Cup semi-final. Hannibal's been kind to us when he said that. We had never been there before. The preparation was less than good. And we froze on the day. And Aberdeen beat us 2-1, and we really should have drew the game. And if we'd probably drawn the game, I think we would have won the replay. But these guys were all having to do that under the disadvantage of being a part-time club. Hannibal says I read that there, a couple of results went wrong for us. We went to Celtic Park leading the league around about November, December time, and we scored. And then Celtic had a couple of disputed goals. Well, they said they were disputed. Johnny Doyle, God rest him, had ran off the park with the ball, and we all stopped for the goal kick and ran back on the park again with the ball crossed it. And I think Tom Sullivan or somebody put it in the net. Celtic equalised. He was 2 yards off the park, and the linesman hadn't seen it. And there was a big rammy about it, and we were all complaining about it. Celtic supporters were booing us for doing that. And I think we lost the place a wee bit and had a couple of players sent off. But for that time, we felt hard done by. And then we lost another couple of games after that. I think we missed out in Europe by about 3 or 4 points or something like that, if my memory serves me correct. But we just weren't able to get out of that. You know, and the wee things that would crop up for any normal team would be able to get in the next morning, sort it out, and have time to do all that. We didn't. We just moved on to the next game and the next game. That's all that mattered. But again, as I say, if we did full-time football down there, I'm pretty damn positive we'd have won something. Might not have been the league, but I'm certain we would have won something.
So I've got a wee question about Davy Hayes, actually, because he became a wee bit of a darling of the Shoot magazine, appearing in it quite a bit, more than probably a lot of people. We used to cut out the bits and put it up on the notice board at Capello. So why Davy Hayes? I think he used to go bevying with one of the reporters. He used to meet in the tin and have a right good swallow with one of the reporters, and Hannibal would tell him all the secrets about Capello and about all the players that he knew. Yeah. I honestly can't remember the reporter's name, or I would have called him out on it. I really can't, but it was one of the younger ones at that time. Right. And that's what they used to do. They used to go and have a wee drink during the night or something like that. Or nights they would meet in town, and this is why Morton used to get a lot of publicity out of it. Yeah. They did, and a lot of that was down to Davy. Davy and his relationship, you know. I was always curious about that, because it did seem to get a lot more than, you know, your average person. And there we go. Thank you for that.
Right, well, we'll come back to some wee snippets from your career later on, Andy. So if we go over the page again here, so it's Ray Clemens's column, The Importance of Our Pre-Season Tour. So Ray Clemens is talking about obviously Liverpool's pre-season tour, and he's talking about playing Dundalk. But the thing I was noticing there that he mentions Anderlecht, who played in his own testimonial. In my testimonial, the Belgians ran out winners by 8-6. That's the kind of testimonial game I like to see. Is games like that with mad score lines. Did you get a testimonial like Capello?
Oh, no chance. Absolutely no chance of that. Yeah, it would never have been my agenda anyway, you know. Yeah. When I left Celtic to go to Capello, I left Celtic under the auspices that things hadn't went well for me my last year at Celtic Park, and I had dropped right out of the pecking order altogether, whereas I'd been in the first team squad at a very young age. And by the time it got round to that time in '76, I had you would have needed radar to find me in there. I dropped right out of the scene altogether. So I had to find somewhere where I could go and reinvent myself or play football on a regular basis to let people see that I could play, because there were so many stories about it at that time, you know. You know, he doesn't do this because he argues with Jock Stein and he fights with Jock Stein and all that nonsense. You hadn't knew football at all, knew that you didn't argue and you didn't fight with Jock Stein. You know, the word was legendary. That's, you know, you just got on with it. But Big Jock had been in the car crash and had been about 18 months to 2 years away from the place. And it was during that time that my career took a nosedive. So I went to Capello, as I said, to reinvent myself, to show people on a short-term basis. I'd spoken to people and spoken to a couple of people in the game. They said, well, if you want to do that, the best place to go is Capello, because they'll sell everything. They'll sell the front door if they get a decent offer for it. So if you go there and do well, you'll go somewhere else and it'll benefit your career and you'll be able to move on. And that was the reason I went there. Not for any other reason. I went there to play for a wee while, to do well, to do all the things that I was going to do. And somebody would come along, a bigger, in inverted commas, better club, and I would move on and continue with my career again. You know, Celtic had tried to sell me a couple of times. Jordy Miller up at Falkirk had offered £60,000, which was a lot of money for a reserve team player at that time. And Celtic had knocked it back. Motherwell had offered a swap deal. Big Jock wanted Bobby Graham, who played for Motherwell at that time in Liverpool. Very, very good player in the Premier League at that time. And Celtic were going to give Motherwell money plus me. Willie McLean was the manager. And I would make up the deal like that. So there'd been a couple of things on the go that I had missed out. And so when Morton came up, I thought, take the opportunity and do that. But it was to, play and score goals and let people know that you were there. And you would get another move. You would move on to bigger and better things. So testimonials were never in my thought. In fact, guys that I played with in there, guys like Davy Hayes, Jim Holmes, John McNeil got a testimonial at the end of it all. These guys, George Anderson, these guys deserve testimonials. George Anderson was there for 14 years, never got a testimonial. Jimmy Holmes was there for 12 years, never got a testimonial. It was only people that the chairman liked in there got a testimonial. Didn't matter, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way. So a lot of guys get testimonials in there, didn't deserve it as much as the guys that I'm mentioning now. But that's the way that Morton Football Club's always been run. They like you, you've more chance of getting a testimonial. Whereas guys who give real service. I think Jimmy Holmes had 3 spells in the Premier League with Morton. He was in the team that I played, and then he got promoted again with another manager, and then he got promoted again. George Anderson was there for a young boy to the end of his career. Davy Hayes, fantastic, captain the club for all the. That's what testimonials are all about. Football players don't need testimonials now. You know, Bosman sorted that out. Bosman stopped football players from being a slave anywhere to actually being able to plan some sort of life and career. Imagine, Tom, here's one for you. Imagine you turned up for training at Capello one Thursday night and you get called into the office and say, we've just sold you to somewhere down in England. Get your stuff ready, get everything organised. It's a Thursday night, you need to be down there for Friday morning, so you're down there at lunchtime. That's you away. They didn't ask you to go home and discuss it with your wife and you've got kids at school and you've got... No, they could sell you anywhere they wanted and you were away the next day. Whether you liked that place or whether you didn't. And that happened to a few guys, but many guys that I know. They threw in a couple of quid, but that's all it was, £1,000, £1,500. And they're going to make your life different. But that was what everybody looked for. That was the only possibility in the game at that time to benefit yourself. And you couldn't get testimonials written into your contract because they were a spontaneous gesture from the club to the player at the end of their working service. So I've heard many. Morton chairman used to promise. Who was it he promised? Oh, Hugh Curry was the gentleman's name. He promised George Anderson a testimonial. He told him he was getting everything was sorted out. Unfortunately, Hugh Curry died before George finished his career. You know, and nobody picked up the mantle and said, well, we'll give George Anderson a testimonial at the end of it. Testimonials would have been more important for the provincial player who didn't earn a lot of money than it would have been for, well, due respect, Ray Clemens or or players at Rangers and Celtic. You know, it'd be more important to the provincial player to be recognised like that financially.
A charity partner this season is the West Bartonshire Community Food Share. This is a charitable organisation that provides various services and support to the local community, including the following: a school uniform bank, school holiday brunch bags, food provisions, Christmas toy bank, cooking and growing lessons, and a baby bank. They provide essential support to the local community in supporting individuals and families, and we will be looking to support them in any way we can through the podcast. This will include drives for donations of food, money and support in the form of volunteers. We will also be raising awareness of the group to highlight the work that they do, but also to ensure that families and individuals who can benefit from the group are aware of these vital services. You can follow them on the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share group on Facebook or West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share.co.uk for the website, and that's West Dunbartonshire with an N. You can also donate through our Just Giving page for the charity at justgiving.com/fundraising/shoot the breeze, one word. Also keep an eye on our Twitter accounts at shoottb_podcast and at Scott's Footy Cards for updates and news on our charity partner. We'd like to say a special thank you to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for the use of the Story of the Blues in the music for our show. You can catch up with Pete on petewiley.co.uk, where you can check out the details of upcoming gigs and new music. We'd also like to thank our producer Diane Jardin for her great work and support on the podcast. Please check out transmissionroom.co.uk, where you can book music recording and rehearsal facilities in Clydebank. And so we've come to the end of part 1 of our podcast with Andy Ritchie. Please follow us on Twitter at shoottb_podcast. You can get us on YouTube and in your favourite podcast app by searching for Shoot the Breeze. Don't forget to subscribe and come back next time to hear the second part of our show with Andy Ritchie. For now, thanks to Andy Ritchie, to Tom for being Tom, and for you for listening. Until the next time, let's shoot the breeze.